So,
just
you guys
we don't
know
do
that this
a lot.
channel
This is
started
like
out
a
with
really
me
huge
criticizing
deal.
feminism, and you may have noticed, but I've moved on to other topics because I've kind of have felt like feminism is dead. It kind of felt like
it was Darcy's very attitude that attracted Elizabeth to him.
Darcy's attitude was rude.
Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. Yes, new background. I'm not sure whether I prefer this to my old background. I was just a little bit sick of the like plain backgrounds, and I tried to do like use my little LED light, but it just made me look so ugly. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm using a ring light, like only a ring light, for the first time in like a good 6 months, and I'm not gonna lie, my eyes are already extremely strained, but anyways, you guys don't care. But today's video is going to be the second part to my misogyny series, so if you haven't checked out the first part, Men Still Hate Women, make sure you do. But today's video I'm going to be focusing on internalized misogyny, pick me girls, bootlickers, and the whole notion of I'm not like the other girls. I'm very aware that this topic has been covered a lot on YouTube. Two of my favourite video essays about it were by Tiffany Ferg and Sarah Z, so make sure you check those video essays out as well because they are so good. And because this subject has been covered before, I'm gonna try and add something new to it. I don't want it to just be a repeat of other videos, so I am going to be talking about very modern forms of internalized misogyny that can sort of go under the radar when you don't really think about it much. Personally, I don't think internalized misogyny is as obvious as it used to be. And what I also find so fascinating about the whole I'm not like the other girls phenomenon is that it is a phenomenon which has only affected women. You rarely see men dragging other men down for having stereotypically masculine interests, unless it's the whole incel Chad meme. But incels are a very small group of men, you know. I'm not like the other girls, and internalized misogyny has affected so many women. So the way I'm going to structure this video is I'm almost going to create a little timeline. So I'm going to start with 2010, and I know internalized misogyny existed way before 2010, but I'm mostly talking about internalized misogyny in relation to social media. So I'm going to go through this timeline from 2010 and all these different versions of internalized misogyny and sort of try and explain why they existed at that time. And also I'm very keen to cover this topic because I, like many girls, have had personal experiences with the I'm not like the other girls. When I was younger, I was very much a big tomboy, so I was very adamant on setting myself apart from girly girls, and then obviously now, blonde hair, lots of makeup, fake tan, nails, like the lot. So now you would consider me like the other girls. And my physical appearance is actually something that I do get judged for, mostly when I started making political focused videos on YouTube. And this sounds like I'm complaining about fitting into modern beauty standards. I'm not, alright, I'm very happy with how I look. You know, when people say, oh, I'm not going to listen to the political opinions of a beautician, I'm really not phased, but I just find it kind of interesting that I do get kind of judged based on my girly appearance versus the content that I create. People don't think that the two really fit together. Also, some of you guys may not even know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about internalized misogyny, pick me girls, I'm not like the other girls. So I'm gonna read a few definitions to get the ball rolling here. So first definition, we have internalized misogyny: when women subconsciously project sexist ideas onto other women and even onto themselves. For the definition of I'm not like the other girls, of course I had to go onto my favourite website ever, Urban Dictionary. It's been a while since I've been on there, and it's defined as a girl who does one or more of the following things and says she's different because of this. That list being enjoys eating, watches Netflix, doesn't go to parties, plays video games, likes reading, especially horror and mystery, doesn't like skirts or dresses or crop tops, listens to old music, listens to Billie Eilish, wears checkered Vans, wears band t-shirts, wears only black, doesn't wear makeup, and /or only wears makeup for themselves. The list goes on. And then pick me girls, referring to internalized misogyny but with the intention to impress men, may refer to themselves as one of the guys/boys, doesn't like hanging out with girls because they're too much drama. They usually slut shame other women and in general bring other women down to impress men. Now, I can't say for sure whether it was bang on 2010 when the I'm not like the other girls discourse peaks in popularity, but I do remember sort of between 2010 and 2015, especially with those really popular Twitter accounts that used to copy other tweets like Common White Girl and Dory. I do believe it was around this time that posts like this were extremely popular, and these posts were very literal and very on the nose. They were literally saying, I'm not like the other girls. So you guys might be wondering, who is the other girl? Let me explain. The other girl typically fits modern beauty standards. In particular, these beauty standards were very much the beauty standards of the early 2000s, which was beauty standards which were projected onto us growing up. So I think that's why we refer to the other girl as fitting these standards. Thin, tanned, long blonde hair, lots of makeup, had very fashionable dress sense, but it was often provocative. Think short skirts, high heels, low cut tops. They have boobs, oh my gosh. They're usually not very intelligent / typical dumb blonde and are promiscuous, but that is usually with a bad connotation. And in my personal experience of seeing these posts, I found that they were typically split 50-50. Not all of them were, oh my god, look at this dumb blonde slut, she's so gross, versus look at me, I'm not like the other girls because I have black hair and I read books. The other 50% of the posts were usually highlighting the differences between them and the other girls. They weren't necessarily bringing them down, they were more just trying to own their differences. And of course, it's still internally misogynistic to drag women down purely based on their interests. But to be fair, I don't think a lot of these girls actually did it with a very spiteful and hateful intention of dragging women down. I think the reason why women and girls try to separate themselves from the other girls and own their differences is basically the way they've been socialized. This has been spoken about before, so I'm not going to focus on it too much, but basically the way that girls are usually socialized, especially 20-30 years ago, their parents would typically push very feminine things on them. Dresses, pink, Disney princesses, the list goes on. Brats, Barbie dolls, etc. And unless you were one of those kids that actually really liked pink and dresses and Disney films and toys, you would try and push them away because they were basically being forced on you from the day you were born. And because all this stereotypically girly stuff gets pushed on you as a kid, you begin to really, really hate it. So when girly things are mentioned in conversations, maybe your family or your friends are asking you who your favourite Disney princess is, whether your favourite colour's pink, what your favourite dresses are, instead of saying, oh, I prefer blue, or oh, I don't really like Disney princesses much, I prefer Tarzan or whatever, you tend to respond with, oh, I hate pink, I hate Disney princesses, I hate girly stuff, because it's been pushed on you so much. So you basically start associating anything stereotypically girly with being bad. So you start associating stereotypical girls as bad. And also another thing which contributes to the whole I'm not like the other girls rhetoric is of course movies. I cannot even begin to count the amount of movies where the main antagonist is the popular mean girl at school who's blonde and wears very promiscuous clothing. She could perhaps be a promiscuous person, but again that's associated to be a bad thing. Meanwhile, the protagonist, she's not like the other girls. She's a brunette for starters, she may wear glasses, she reads books, perhaps she's shy, she's unpopular, she doesn't dress well, or she wears baggy clothing, or she has more simple but still not girly style. Or maybe she has a very alternative style. She's not interested in boys or impressing boys, maybe she's a virgin, and sometimes these protagonists will go through a makeover, have a little glow up, but I've made a whole video about that ages ago if you want to check that out. And also with these chick flick teen films is everything centres around the male gaze. So often the love interest will say, you're not like the other girls and that's why I like you, or you're different, you're not like the other girls. And it's seen as a good thing because obviously the be all and end all of life is to impress men. I'm growing up as a young girl and consuming all of this media at a pretty rapid pace, of course things are going to sink in and you're going to start developing conscious and unconscious biases. You may look up to the protagonists in these films and reject being like the other girls, especially because things often go really well for the protagonist. They get the bloke they want, they usually graduate school, have a fun prom night, whatever, and things don't go well for the stereotypical blonde bimbo. And this almost anti-girly sentiment sticks with you throughout your childhood and your teenagehood, and I think that is why these sort of 2010 I'm not like the other girls posts came about. And I think what's actually a really sweet outcome of all of this old school misogyny is the fact that now people edit the posts and make the like blonde girl and the girl who's not like the other girls like girlfriends. Like, it's so cute. And funnily enough, when I was looking at these posts, I mostly looked on Tumblr and I looked on r/not like the other girls. I was expecting like to get angry at all of this internalized misogyny. I was expecting my blood to be boiling, for me to be rolling my eyes excessively, but if I'm going to be completely honest, I mostly felt very sorry for the people that reposted these posts or just made these posts in the first place, because I think so much insecurity comes about when you feel like you don't fit in, especially when you're at school. School's like one of the worst times of your life. So I think there's something very therapeutic and very cathartic about reposting these I'm not like the other girls posts and owning your differences. I want to talk about internalized misogyny and its impact on fanfiction. Now, I have made a whole video about cringy Wattpad fanfiction, so feel free to check that video out. But if you guys don't know, in a majority of fanfictions written by young girls, young women, they are absolutely riddled with internalized misogyny. And I'm not going to completely dig out the writers of these fanfictions because most of them are teenage girls, and I'm sure most of them don't think like this anymore, but it is a very common trope in fanfictions for the original character or YN to not be like the other girls. She's not like the other girls because she reads books, and she's ugly despite having clear skin, a heart-shaped face, bright blue eyes, plump lips, button nose, and long wavy brown hair which they throw into a messy bun. They're a social outcast, they get no male attention because they read books. And often the antagonist of these fanfictions is the typical blonde bimbo stereotype, and often they are promiscuous, which is seen as a bad thing because, you know, fanfictions, they already had so much internalized misogyny in there, they had to sprinkle in a little bit of slut shaming too. One of the most well-known examples of this is After by Anna Todd. If you guys don't know what the fanfiction After is, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. It's basically a Harry Styles fanfiction which was so popular on Wattpad, it got over 1 billion reads, I believe, which is insane. And because it was so popular, it got developed into a book, and obviously they switched the names around for legal reasons, and then it got developed into a movie, and there's been a sequel recently too, which looks really funny. I still need to watch it. But not only is this fanfiction full of gaslighting, emotional abuse and manipulation, but also it is full of internalized misogyny. The original character protagonist Tessa is not like the other girls because she's very innocent. She's a virgin, she doesn't really drink or party, she's very dedicated to her studies, she wears very plain and modest clothing. And look, there is nothing wrong with being any of those things. The issue lies in the fact that Tessa shames anyone, mostly women, for not being like her. She shames the girls for not studying, she shames the girls for drinking too much, she shames the girls for partying, she shames the girls for having dyed hair and piercings, for having casual sex, etc. It's kind of frustrating because you can easily have a character who is innocent and is a virgin and meets someone and she feels out of her depth. You can genuinely write very good stories with that sort of template. But you can do this without all the internalized misogyny, especially because Harden, who's meant to be Harry Styles, displays these exact same behaviours that Tessa shames the girls in the book for doing. But it's okay if Harden does it because Harden is a man. And this is just one very popular example, but it is thousands of fan fictions focus on the original character slash YN not being like the other girls and dragging other women down, packed full of internalized misogyny. And again, I'm not really bashing the girls for this because you can't really help the way that you're socialized. I'm going to move on from the conversation about After by Anna Todd, but if you guys want to know more about the fanfiction, I highly recommend checking out Belle XL's video. I've mentioned this video on my channel before because it is so good. I'm going to discuss how internalized misogyny has intertwined itself with politics, and in particular I'm going to be talking about the 2016 anti-SJW era on YouTube. Most of you guys will know what I'm talking about, but just in case you don't, around 2016 there was a real era on YouTube where SJW cringe compilations were hugely popular. Left-wing politics was so unpopular. You were seen as a crazy SJW if you had any leftist ideas, and it was really the peak time for the alt-right. And basically in these social justice warrior cringe compilations, they would just compile the worst and cringiest moments of the left, and they would use that as evidence as to why left-wing politics was bad. And sometimes they weren't even that cringy, sometimes it was just people getting a bit angry, a bit emotional. At this time, the most popular political YouTubers slash figures were Blair White, Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't just white, straight, cis men who were a part of this movement. Women also got sucked into this as well. I would know this because I was one of them. Oh, I wasn't like majorly involved. I just used to watch those SJW cringe videos. Oh my god, oh. I used to watch them, and I basically used to think in 2016, I was around 17 years old, I used to think that we didn't need feminism. And it was so weird because my general politics, I've been raised by a Labour supporter, so my politics at that time when I was 17 were very much centre to centre left. So I never had any right-wing political beliefs at all. But for some reason, I was very centre left with my politics at the time, but I was like, oh, we don't need feminism, by the way. And it was just like, where did that come from? You know where that came from? Watching cringe SJW compilations when I was 17. And for a while, I was extremely internally misogynistic. I literally used to think that we did not need feminism. And I think the reason that I got sucked into this by watching these cringe compilations is, first of all, secondhand embarrassment. I didn't really want to be associated with feminism. Like, I found it very embarrassing. And also at that time, being a straight, white, middle-class, cisgender woman, I hadn't really experienced any sexism or misogyny that I was aware of at that time. So just because of my own personal experience, I thought that we didn't need it, when really feminism is about going beyond your own experiences. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I really did realise how much we still need feminism, mostly because I started getting harassed and groped a lot. I think it's very easy to get sucked into the anti-feminism rhetoric because it does make you feel like you're not like the other girls, and on top of that, you're way more likely to get male approval for being anti-feminist rather than being a feminist. And I think that this does appeal to a lot of women. I am someone who heavily relates to thriving off of male approval. I'm still working on not putting all of my self-worth into what men think of me. I blame it on my daddy issues. What I'm trying to say is that if you are one of these women who is anti-feminist and you think that we don't need feminism, first of all, check out my last video. Second of all, go beyond your own experiences. And third of all, stop licking the boots. Please stop licking the boots. You aren't impressing anyone other than these incel men who hate women, and you deserve better than that. And the SJW cringe compilation era of YouTube does represent way more than internalized misogyny. It also represents how mainstreamed alt-right politics became at that time. I do maybe want to make a whole video about 2016 politics, but I am like kind of scared. If you guys would like to see that, just let me know. Finally, I'm going to talk about internalized misogyny nowadays. I asked you guys over on my Instagram for your own personal experiences of internalized misogyny, so if you don't follow me on Instagram, make sure you do. The first thing which maybe I'm reaching here, but I feel like it's not spoken about very often, is alternative girls on TikTok. There are lots of different alternative girls on TikTok, but I mostly see this behaviour displayed by sort of the Brandy Melville Pinterest girls of TikTok. Basically alt girls who wear Brandy Melville wide leg jeans. They're very slim, they're very pretty. They fit in with that Pinterest aesthetic, which is really popular at the moment. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this aesthetic because it's actually exactly how I dress. But one thing I've noticed is that some of these girls kind of thrive off of the fact that they are not like the other girls, which is actually quite ironic, being as this Pinterest aesthetic is one of the most popular fashion trends at the moment. In American alt girls, I've noticed that some of them bash Lululemon girls, which is just a really popular sports brand, but I'm going to focus mostly on the British alt girls. And the first thing they do is they kind of bash chavs. And if you've been on this channel for a while, you know I absolutely hate the word chav. If you guys don't know, chav is derived from the Romani word for child, which is chavvy, but it is often used in a very derogatory way by the middle class towards the working class. It's just classism, basically. But it does happen that some of these alt girls who are usually middle class and buy clothes from charity shop and then sell them on to Depop for 10 times the price. A video about Depop gentrification coming soon, by the way. But these middle class alt girls will bash chavs, whether it's the way that they dress, the way they do their makeup, the way they do their hair. When a chav wears an Adidas tracksuit, it's trashy, but when a middle class white girl from the Cotswolds wears an Adidas tracksuit, it's Y2K, baby. And it isn't just chavs that get bashed, it's also Fiat 500 girls. Those poor girls have been dragged into this too. And I know a lot of you guys aren't from the UK and you probably got no idea what I'm talking about. Fiat 500 girls, I can only really define them as being very glam. They sort of do their makeup sort of P. Louise style, they sort of dress very Pretty Little Thing, misguided, buy lots of dresses from Opoly, they will usually drive a Fiat 500. I pure wish I was Molly May. And look, I've poked fun at Fiat 500 Twitter before, especially because recently some of Fiat 500 Twitter have been advocating for eugenics and suggesting that the whole country comes out of lockdown and it should be survival of the fittest, which is extremely problematic, but I'm not going to paint the whole of Fiat 500 Twitter with the same eugenics brush. But I've seen it online that some of these alt girls will bash Fiat 500 girls based on the way they dress, the way they do their makeup. They accuse them of being basic and complain that guys only go for Fiat 500 girls. And I know that not all alt girls are like this, I know it's just a few, but I have heard quite a few people discussing the pretentiousness and the judgmentalness of the sort of alt girl community. And like I mentioned before, what is so ironic is these alt girls are partaking in an extremely popular fashion trend. So they could be accused of being basic, you know, it's not super revolutionary to wear wide leg jeans. Wearing wide leg jeans doesn't make you better than anyone. I just think dragging people for the trends that they choose to follow is just so lame. Let's talk about quotes, let's talk about very common statements that people will say that are usually internally misogynistic. They will say this to look different, they will say this to try and fit in with the boys, when really it's just internalized misogyny. I've only got two quotes actually, but both of them can sort of be defined as pick-me behaviour, meaning that women will say this to try and impress / win men over. I have no idea how you girls wear so much makeup. I never wear makeup. I prefer being natural. On first glance, this can't really be seen as that internally misogynistic, and some of the time it really isn't. Some of the time people will genuinely just say like, I have no idea how girls wear so much makeup, like I just prefer being natural. A lot of the time mums say this, actually my mum says this all the time, but a lot of the time when women are saying this, they're almost implying like, oh, you need to wear all that makeup and I don't. And as far as I'm aware, women do this to impress guys. It's classic pick-me behaviour, because on social media we've seen a lot that men will say they prefer natural girls, and also the whole take her swimming on a first date rhetoric, which is stupid. So when women are saying this, they're usually saying it in a misogynistic way to try and impress men. And this raises the question of, why do women put down other women to impress men? And the answer is as simple as we live in a society. We live in a society that, oh, it makes me cringe when I say that. We live in a society which values the male gaze far more than female empowerment. As I've said before, most of the media that we've grown up consuming has centered around a protagonist trying to impress a man, and this male love interest prefers you over everyone else because you're not like the other girls. And I will say that child and teen media has come forward a lot. You know, you've got films like Frozen, amongst loads of others, that focus on far more than just a romantic relationship, focus on sibling relationships, family, platonic relationships, as a woman being your own hero. And it's really nice to see that, and it's very nice to know that this generation of kids and teenagers is going to grow up consuming that kind of media. And I'm not saying that having movies and TV shows that center around romantic relationships is wrong. I love a rom-com, I love a romantic drama, I love a slice of life romantic anime series, but the problem arises when nearly every single movie that is put out to children and teens is completely focused on the male gaze and impressing the male protagonist, and that's the be all and end all. When you shove this narrative down girls' throats that they're only going to be truly happy when they impress a man, not only is it extremely heteronormative.
My camera accidentally cut off, but what I was saying is that because you're shoving all this media down kids and teenagers' throats, it's no wonder that not only is it very heteronormative, but also they're going to start throwing other girls under the bus to try and impress men.
And the next classic pick-me girl quote is, "I prefer hanging out with guys because girls are too much drama." This has always been something which really irritates me. I'm someone who has a mixture of male and female friends, but I mostly experienced this stereotype when I was a beautician. If you guys don't know, I was a beautician between the ages of 19 and 21 before I became a full-time YouTuber. I worked in a salon / makeup store, and I worked with all girls, and it was very common for either my clients to ask or my family or my friends to ask, "Oh, there must be so much drama because you're working with all girls." And of course, like any workplace, there was drama. Girls would bitch about other girls in the staff room because they didn't clean up their workstations properly. Girls would bicker with each other. All of the full-timers would be in a bad mood on the same week because all of our periods synced up. But I wouldn't say that it was more drama than when I worked in a mixed work environment. One thing I've noticed with my personal experiences with male and female friendships, I would love to know you guys' experience as well, whether you disagree with me, is I find that girls are more emotional when it comes to friendships but less confrontational. So if a friend does something to them and hurts their feelings, rather than confronting them, they'd rather just confide in a friend and vent about it and kind of call it a day. But whilst men, I find that they are more confrontational, but they tend to get less upset over friendship tensions. But hear me out, because I do have a theory for this. Again, I could be chatting out of my absolute arse, but this is just me and my personal experiences. But I feel like men tend to get less upset and less emotional when it comes to friendships. It's because of the way they're socialized. Men are literally socialized to not be emotional, to not cry, because it isn't masculine. So it's not just men not getting upset over friendships. Men usually don't get upset about that much because that's how they're socialized. And that's why we see when men do get into arguments with each other, it tends to end in physical fighting, which personally I think is way more dramatic than two girls just bitching about each other. And it's very hard to keep stuff in when you feel upset about stuff, so of course you're going to vent about it to a friend, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's drama. Sometimes you just need to bitch about your friend because they annoyed you. I could be completely off here, but I do believe it does boil down to gender stereotypes, toxic masculinity, and the way that men and women are socialized completely differently from one another. I'm just going to throw this out there is nothing wrong with having more male friends than female friends. If you just tend to have more male friends, you just tend to get along better with men, you share more interests with men, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I do think is some big weirdo behaviour is claiming that you hate female friendships because they're too much drama, because I think that's a bit of a reach, especially because when men fall out they literally end up in physical fights with each other. Just a really short conclusion to this video. Although we have moved past the OG internalized misogyny posts, internalized misogyny still exists. We all know this. Whether it's slut shaming, whether it's saying you're not friends with females because they're too much drama, whether it's saying that you don't like wearing makeup because you prefer being natural. The list goes on. It's just not as on the nose as it used to be. And all I can really say to conclude this video is just try and unlearn these habits. I know it's really hard. I still struggle with internalized misogyny because literally we're all raised this way, but just try your best to try and unlearn these habits. Really, if you catch yourself being internally misogynistic, just check yourself. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of my new background as well, because I personally have really warmed up to it already. And yes, I will see you guys in my next video.